The house sold in March. I didn't know that until I drove past it in April and saw someone else's life through the windows. There was a child's bicycle on the porch, a wreath on the door my mother had never owned, and a sold placard still staked in the yard where her rose bushes used to be. I sat in my car at the end of that street for a long time. The engine was still running. My mother had lived in that house for 31 years. She raised us there. She died there, and my brother had sold it. Quietly, legally, completely, while I was still learning how to sleep through the night without calling her number by accident. I didn't know he could do that. I didn't know he had. My mother's name was Ruth. She was 73 when she was diagnosed. Vascular dementia, the kind that doesn't announce itself all at once but arrives in pieces, a little more of her gone each time you visited. Some weeks she was completely herself, sharp, funny, stubborn in the way only she could be. Other weeks she'd ask me where my father was, and I'd have to remind her he'd been gone for 11 years. She hated those weeks. On the days she was clear, she'd apologize for them. My brother Daniel managed her care. That was the arrangement we'd settled into without ever formally discussing it. He lived 40 minutes from her house. I lived 4 hours away, and so he became the one who took her to appointments, managed her medications, sat with her on the hard days. I came when I could. I called every single day. I trusted him completely. He was my brother. He was all I had left of her. What I didn't know, what I couldn't have seen from 4 hours away, was that 6 months into her diagnosis, Daniel had sat with my mother on one of her unclear days and had her sign a power of attorney document, giving him full authority over her finances and property. She didn't tell me. I don't know if she understood what she was signing. My mother died in September. Daniel and I stood on either side of her bed. He held her left hand, I held her right, and when it was over, he put his arm around me in the hallway and said, "We'll figure the rest out together." For 7 months, I believed him. I called an estate attorney in April, not because anything felt wrong, but because I'd received some tax documents I didn't understand and wanted someone to walk me through them. Routine. That was all it was supposed to be. The attorney asked me, almost as an aside, whether the property sale had already been handled or whether that was still outstanding. I asked her what property sale. She pulled up the county records while I was on the phone. The house had sold in March for $412,000. The transaction was executed under power of attorney. The signatory was Daniel. I remember she kept talking. I stopped hearing her somewhere around the word proceeds. I asked her to send me everything she had, and then I got in my car and drove to my mother's street. That's when I saw the bicycle, the wreath, the rose bushes gone. I want to tell you I confronted him that night, that I called him, screaming, that I demanded answers. I didn't. I sat on my kitchen floor and went through 7 months of memories and looked at every single one of them differently. The way he'd handled all the paperwork after she died. The way he'd say the estate was more complicated than expected every time I asked. The way he'd steered every conversation about her belongings towards sentiment and away from specifics. He hadn't been grieving with me. He'd been managing me. I thought about the last time I'd visited my mother before she died. She'd been having a clear day. She grabbed my hand before I left and held it longer than usual. I thought she was just being affectionate. I think now she might have been trying to tell me something she didn't have the words for anymore. I didn't call Daniel. Not yet. I hired the estate attorney. I hired a second one who specialized in elder law and contested powers of attorney. And I spent the next 3 weeks gathering everything. Her medical records from the 6 months before the POA was signed, her doctor's notes, her cognitive assessments, her medication logs. What those records showed was this. In the month my mother signed that document, she'd scored a 14 out of 30 on a standard cognitive assessment. A score of 24 or below indicates significant impairment. Her physician had noted in her file that she was, and I'm reading this directly, unable to reliably retain new information or fully comprehend complex legal agreements. She'd signed a document transferring control of everything she owned. On a day her own doctor had documented she couldn't understand what she was signing. I filed to contest the power of attorney in probate court. And then I called Daniel. He answered on the second ring. He sounded normal. He asked how I was doing. I told him I'd spoken to an attorney. I told him I knew about the house. There was a long silence. And then he said, "I was going to tell you. I just needed time to sort out the numbers." 2 years. He'd needed 2 years. The probate hearing was 4 months later. I presented my mother's medical records, her cognitive assessments, her physician's notes, a timeline showing every asset that had moved, the house, her jewelry, a savings account she'd kept since 1987, against the dates of her documented decline. Daniel's attorney argued the POA had been properly executed, that my mother had been having a good day, that the document was legal. My attorney asked the court to consider one question. If Ruth had been fully competent on the day she signed, why had Daniel chosen that particular day, a day her medical file flagged, rather than any of the clear days her records documented? Daniel didn't have an answer for that. The judge ruled that the power of attorney had been executed under conditions of diminished capacity. It was invalidated. Every transaction made under it was subject to full accounting and recovery. Daniel was ordered to repay the estate, the house sale proceeds, the jewelry, the savings account, every dollar. He didn't have it. He'd spent it. What followed was a payment order, a lien on his own property, and a referral to the district attorney's office for review of potential elder financial abuse charges. The referral was accepted. I called him that evening, after the ruling, after my attorney had walked me to my car and told me she'd never seen documentation that clean in a contested POA case. He picked up on the fourth ring. And for the first time in 2 years, he didn't sound normal. I didn't yell. I didn't need to. I just said, "It's done, Daniel." There was a long silence, and then he said, very quietly, "I didn't think you'd actually do it." Not, "I'm sorry." Not, "I was wrong." I didn't think you'd actually do it. That was the moment I understood everything. He hadn't been counting on the evidence. He'd been counting on me, on the version of me that loved him enough to let it go. I let him sit in the silence for a moment, and then I hung up. I haven't spoken to him since. I used my share of the recovered estate to buy something small, a house with a yard. I planted rose bushes along the front walk. I don't know what my mother would have said about all of it, about Daniel, about what he did. She loved him. She loved us both in that specific, exhausting way that mothers love difficult children, without condition, even when it costs them something. I think about the day she grabbed my hand. I think about what she might have known and couldn't say. And I think about the fact that even at the end, even when the words were leaving her, she still reached for me. She trusted me to pay attention. It just took me longer than it should have. Daniel thought the paperwork would bury it, that the legal language would make it clean, that by the time anyone looked closely, there'd be nothing left to find. He forgot one thing. Our mother raised me, too. And I knew exactly where she kept everything.